Hello, my friends. How are you? Welcome to 30 Albums for 30 Years, 1964 through 1994. I am your host, Jay Sweet. Today we're going to check out the album Grant Green's Idle Moments, released February of 1965, but recorded on November 4th and 15th of 1963 for Blue Note Records. Now, I also urge you to check out my interview with Grant Green Jr., Grant Green's son, who has some fantastic stories about his father. So anyway, let's get into it. Grant Green's Idle Moments, Blue Note Records. All right, so let's learn a little bit about Grant Green. Grant Green is one of the great jazz guitarists and a personal favorite of mine. He was born on June 6, 1935 in St. Louis. His father was a police officer who played blues and folk guitar. So he received some early training from his dad, and then after about a year of private instruction, he mainly learned from listening and studying records. His main influences included Charlie Christian, Charlie Parker, and Lester Young. By 13, he began performing in a gospel ensemble, and then began playing boogie-woogie music, which was popular in St. Louis, before switching to playing mainly jazz. His first recordings were with tenor saxophonist Jimmy Forrest, in an ensemble that also included drum legend Elvin Jones. He then began performing and touring as a member of Lou Donaldson's band in 1959, and then settled in New York later that year. So without going through the usual progression of playing on a bunch of records as a sideman, Grant Green was offered a recording contract with Blue Note Records pretty early on, 1960. However, those first recordings as the leader were not released until way after his death, 2001. But from 1961 through 1965, Green recorded a number of albums for the Blue Note label, both as a leader and as a sideman. But many of his releases were not issued again until after he passed. His most celebrated album from the period is Idle Moments, the album we're going to check out today. So as I mentioned in the introduction, Idle Moments was recorded on November 4th and 15th of 1963, but it was held from release until February of 1965. The ensemble includes some notable and familiar sidemen, such as the great Joe Henderson on tenor saxophone, Bobby Hutcherson on vibraphone, Duke Pearson on piano, Bob Cranshaw on bass, and Al Harewood on drums. Both the Allmusic Guide and the Penguin Guide to Jazz give the record its highest rating. Following the release of Idle Moments, Grant Green left Blue Note Records in 1966 and recorded for Verve and other labels. But from 1967 through 1969, he was mostly inactive due to the effects of heroin addiction. In 1969, he returned to the scene and to Blue Note with a more funk-based sound. In 1974, he left Blue Note once again, but continued to record, and his music was now being marketed as acid jazz, which is basically a title given to groove-based jazz. Some of his music from this period was sampled by groups like Us Three, A Tribe Called Quest, and Public Enemy. In 1978, Grant Green spent time in the hospital, but against doctor's orders, he immediately went back on the road. On January 31st, 1979, Grant Green had a heart attack and died at the age of 43. All right, let's drop the needle on side number one, track number one. The title track is Idle Moments, written by Duke Pearson. The tempo to this one is slow and the groove and melody are kind of sexy, and it's an interesting choice to begin an album with a slower number. Rarely done. Now, there are only 4 tracks on this record, and therefore each track is lengthy. Idle Moments clocks in at around 15 minutes. Around the 2-minute mark, Grant Green offers the first solo. Take notice of his mid-range tone and bluesy phrasing. Now, Green was never the most technical of guitarists, but he had a particular way of presenting clear phrases and well-connected melodic lines that were based in the blues. At around 5 minutes and 50 seconds, Duke Pearson offers his solo. Prior to this recording, he had already worked with Cannonball Adderley, Donald Byrd, and Bobby Hutcherson. He also released 5 albums as a leader and served as an A&R rep for Blue Note Records. The next soloist is the great tenor saxophonist Joe Henderson, one of the most exciting saxophonists to emerge in the 1960s. Henderson had begun recording for Blue Note as a leader and a sideman by 1963, the same year that this album was recorded. As displayed on the track, Henderson has a gorgeous tone and is an incredible improviser. Now, around 11 minutes, Bobby Hutcherson takes the solo, and Hutcherson was the premier vibraphonist at the time, and he already worked as a leader, and with Eric Dolphy, Andrew Hill, Jackie McLean, and others. Following his solo, the melody is reinstated, and overall, Idle Moments is relaxing and beautifully performed, and just a great track. Check it out, Idle Moments. Get comfortable. Track number 2 is Jean de Fleur. It's the only track on the album credited to Grant Green. The tempo can best be described as medium up-tempo. The melody is clever, and it's hard swinging. Now, the blend of the tenor saxophone, guitar, and vibes offers a unique tonal palette on this track and throughout the album. Grant Green takes the first solo, and as always, he is soulful, and his lines are played with strong clarity and cleverness. Joe Henderson, who we've talked about quite a bit on this program, enters at around 3 minutes and 25 seconds, and he offers a new level of intensity. At around the 4 minute and 20 second mark, Hutcherson enters with his solo, and he is equally as impressive. And at about 5 minutes and 30 seconds, Grant Green jumps back in for a short second solo before the main melody is reintroduced. Some credit should be given to drummer Al Harewood and bassist Bob Cranshaw, who do a fine job holding down the groove throughout this track and the record. An alternate track of the tune is included on the CD re-release of the album, Jean de Fleur. Okay, time to flip the record and drop the needle on side number 2, track number 1. And the song is Django, a cool jazz vehicle written by pianist John Lewis, who came to fame first as a member of Dizzy Gillespie's orchestra and then with the Modern Jazz Quartet. The title pays tribute to legendary Roma guitarist Django Reinhardt, but the music is really not characteristic of Django's style. The melody blends classical and jazz influences before shifting to a swing feel for the solos. During the solo section, Harewood and Cranshaw shift their rhythmic accents. Now, after a short interlude, Joe Henderson makes his entrance at around 4 minutes. His performance on this one is one of the true highlights of the record. Bobby Hutcherson follows, and like Grant Green, he often relied on a mixture of blues and bebop phrasing. Pearson then plays the final solo before Grant Green takes a second solo, and then the main melody is reintroduced. The track is 8 minutes and 44 seconds long, and an alternate version lasting over 13 minutes is included as an alternate track on the CD reissue. Check it out, the jazz classic, jazz standard, Django. The final track of the original LP is Nomad, another Duke Pearson original played as an up-tempo swing. The melody is the most exploratory and angular on the album. Henderson plays the first solo, a welcome change from the other 3 tracks in which Grant Green begins, and following Henderson is Bobby Hutcherson, and at around 6 minutes Grant Green plays his solo. At times his guitar is slightly distorted, and it might be my favorite of his solos on the record. One of the things that Grant Green often did was find a short melodic or rhythmic phrase that he would repeat over and over and over again with some variation. You can hear him doing this at around 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Following is a solo by Duke Pearson, and noticed how Harewood accents beats 4 of every measure to add more rhythmic interest. The melody then returns, leading to the conclusion of the song and the conclusion of the record. Nomad. All right, cats, we made it through the record, or at least the original LP, and we are better for it. So it's now time to lift the needle off the record and pack it away for another day. And in conclusion, Idle Moments is not overly experimental or really conceptual. It's just a fine jazz recording played by some gifted musicians. And it's a strong introduction to the playing and the spirit of one of my favorite musicians, Grant Green. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed today's program, and of course I urge you to check out my interview with Grant Green Jr. You'll learn more about his father, this record, and his own life and music. To learn more about this program, you can go to 30albumsfor30years.com. We're also on all the social media sites, and we broadcast these episodes on YouTube as well as Spotify and other places. So together, let's keep this music alive and have a wonderful day.